Welcome, everybody, to Dine with the Divine. I'm your host, Ashley, and together we'll be exploring the magical, the mystical, and everything in between. So on today's episode, we're going to talk about some food magic and a beautiful Cinderella story, because we love a Cinderella story on this podcast. I hope you're having a great day, and if not, I hope it gets really much better soon. So today, we have a fantastic guest as usual. We have Caireann. And Caireann is a Slavic American folk practitioner living in the shadow of the New York City area. Her journey into folk magic has been under the tutelage of her Slavic Baba and Polish Babcia. I couldn't say this word, actually, because I've said it before. Babcia, that's what I mean. You guys know what I mean. At a very young age, working with her ancestors, incorporating Slavic folklore and traditions such as ceromancy, smoke divination, and pyromancy, along with a deep respect and understanding for the duality of the old ways. This has all shaped her practice. Caireann considers herself a blend of hearth, hedge, folk traditions, walking between this modern world and that across the veil. Her unpredictable hedge abilities lend a little bit of spice to her goulash of a practice. Yay! So how are you today, Caireann?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm
Absolutely.
honored to be here.
Oh, great. No, I really enjoy your content. It's really cute. It's really fun. I feel like I'm learning something. I really like it. I always start out by asking people, how did you start your practice with all your magical beautifulness?
Oh my goodness. This is the I don't think that my story is too far off from a lot of practitioners, to be perfectly honest, because especially in folk magic, there is this, usually in folk magic, you're brought up in some type of an Abrahamic religion or tradition, and this is like the old ways, the things that your grandparents or your mother and father did outside of the church or the synagogue or wherever you went and worshipped, because there is that how would you say, and it's the colonization in all cultures. And so even in the Slavic cultures, there was the Christendom came in, Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire came in and said, hey, you're all going to be Catholics now. And so the people, under fear of death, in most cases, they converted, but secretly they kept their old ways. So this all ties into my story, because I'm growing up, my mother was Roman Catholic, my father was Byzantine Orthodox, and this is the environment that I was raised in. But I knew more of the Slovak and the Polish part of my ethnicity than I did the American experience. And so what happened was, I'm immersed in all of this, and I felt this, and then I would go see my Baba or my Babci, and like when my parents weren't around, they were teaching me these things. And so there was like this religious tug of war, like back and forth, like I would feel a pull towards it, and and I'd be learning these things, but at the same time, then I would go to church and then I would hear, this is bad. This is bad. You can't be doing this. And then I would say, okay, this is bad. I can't be doing this. But then I would start doing these things that I was being taught. And so there was this back and forth for a long time, for many years. I mean, I was knee-high to the sink when my grandmother started teaching me these things. So it's been with me for a long time. But I think it was probably in my 20s that I finally started to say, I'm going to carry this tradition and I'm going to do these things. And I've always had this in me. And then fully into my 30s, I just embraced it. And I said, this is just who I am. Yeah.
Okay. Very nice. Yeah. And like you said, I hear all the people who've come on this podcast who are so willing to share their story. I think we all have that similarity of knowing something. A lot of people, it's because of their roots or where they're from. They know that, and they have this kind of magical thinking when you're a kid, and then you get older, and there comes a point sometimes where you feel like, oh, I gotta be like everybody else. I'm not gonna really deal with this. And then you just get older and don't care. So you're like, I'm just gonna do whatever I want. So I just love that. And you know what? I feel like a lot of people, and maybe this is just me, but I feel like a lot of people never get to that point where they feel like they don't care, and they lose a lot of that magic in their life, and it sucks because it's such, and at least this is how I feel. I now can't imagine my life without this spiritual part of it. One of my friends said this one time. She's like, does everyone know how much fun this is? Does everyone, what are the rest of you guys doing all day? You guys must be really bored. Yeah, it's like, it's so weird. It's like once you can never go back.
That's
fun.
That's such an incredible, I love the way you express that, because I was having a similar thought the other day. It was interesting that I was just walking from room to room and moving things around and lighting candles and changing up herbs and things. And I thought to myself, this is just, I don't have to think about a daily practice. This is just who I am.
Yeah.
And it comes through in the way I decorate my home and the things that I say and the things that I study and the people that I associate with. And this is nice. I like this.
You're like, wow, the person I have become is great. You know,
I'm really cool with this. It was either that or maybe it was the mugwort that I was born with.
I know mugwort will give you some thoughts. You'll be like, you know what? Actually, I'm awesome. Yeah. Yeah, my life is pretty cool sometimes.
Yeah, this is pretty nice.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's so fun. So I also wanted to ask you, so a couple things when I was looking at like your profile and different things that you do. What can you tell us what is ceromancy? Because I didn't get to look that up.
Oh, that's just a big fancy word for reading how the wax drips off a candle. That's all it is.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think I've seen different types of how wax drip. I've seen some people do it into water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a more traditional. That's very like old country, old school way of doing it.
Okay.
But there's so many different ways that you can do it, because I think a lot of times what people forget is that like our ancestors, they didn't have time to sit around and wait for a candle to finish burning and then to study it. While Baba was doing that, she was making bread and she was baking and she had to go down for coal, and like she was like
busy.
Sitting there studying the exactly. So like she didn't have time to sit there and to drip it into the water. But every so often, like if there was a real burning question about something was going on, if somebody gave you the evil eye or something, then she would sit there and she would do it. But otherwise, you just let the candle burn down and you pray your intentions over, and then you let the candle burn down, and then you look at it and you see what shapes or how it burned. If the smoke went to the east, it was an emotional issue. It went to the west, it was more of a political or something like that. They had their ways of knowing, and so it was the same thing with the wax. Like, how did the wax drip? Did it form? Did it make a puddle? Is it all on one side? That kind of a thing.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I looked up the words because I feel like I'm so folksy. I would just be like, just candle readings, and people would be like, it's called ceromancy. Like, I don't know. I'm a bumpkin.
I love that. I know. That's why I was thinking like right before we started, I was like looking at my notes real quick, and I was like, man, I should have looked up some of these words. I don't know what to say.
Don't worry about it.
Pyro, I know, because when I was a kid, I knew I was going to be magical because I love to burn stuff. And my mom would always be like, you're a pyromaniac and you're going to burn this house down, because I just like to burn stuff. Like, that was so weird. And then I remember, and this is so random, I remember I looked up like I was watching some show that I probably shouldn't have been watching at the age of 11. And they were talking about like serial killers and like, how do you know your kid's going to be like a serial killer? And they were like, one of the things is they burn stuff. And I was like, I don't want to trouble. Yeah, but then they were like hurting animals. I was like, oh no, I don't do that. But then I thought of the time that like I cut a worm in half because I found out that it could multiply. And I was like, I have hurt animals. I'm such a bad person. I was worried for him. I remember being seriously very worried that I was going to become a serial killer, and telling like my friend at school, and she's like, no, Ashley, you just like, don't kill people, and that's how you don't become one. I was like, oh, okay. I was like,
note to self. Okay.
I know, note to self. I just don't have to kill anybody. I was like, okay, I haven't done that, so I guess I'm good for now. 35 years, I still haven't murdered anybody, so I think I'm all right now. I'm out of that phase.
Oh, good, I'm safe.
I know. I'm like, thank God.
I know. Passing phase.
Right? I turned 18. I was like, oh, okay, I didn't murder anybody. I'm not going to become a child serial killer. It's fine. Oh my God. other thing I was going to ask you, so is smoke divination similar to that? Like you're reading the
Yeah,
smoke?
I don't, to be honest, the way I learned it is like the candle is a whole unit. So
Okay.
for us, we don't separate. Okay,
Okay.
I'm just going to blow it out and or I'm going to watch, or I'm just going to watch the flame, or I'm just going to read the wax. The way I was taught it, and I mean, this is the thing about folk magic that's so beautiful is that
Mm-hmm.
it's like baking a cake. You and I can
Yeah.
both have a cake, a recipe for a chocolate cake, but you might add vanilla in yours and I might not, or I might add
Mm-hmm.
something different, or you might make yours with dates and I might sweeten mine with honey. So there's still going to be chocolate cake at the end of
Yeah.
the day. So for me, like I might say, this is how I learned it, and somebody might listen to this podcast and go, absolutely not. That's not the way. Like, oh, okay. Yeah. That's why I only have 2,000 followers, because I don't want to make anybody angry. I don't have time for that. I'm getting old now. I just want everybody to be friends. All I can say is this is the way I learned it, right or wrong, and it works for me. Like you burn in the candle and you watch the flame, and if there's any, like we call it soot coming off, how is it burning? Is
Mm-hmm.
it burning clean or not? If it's a strong flame, is it leaning to the right, to the east or the west? That
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And then then ultimately when you blow it or snuff it out. We usually blow it out because then your breath goes into the flame. You blow it out and you see how the smoke goes, if it's curling, if it's leaning this way or
Mm-hmm.
that way. But I always loved my grandfather was the funniest. We'd be doing, it'd be like, it means the house is drafty. Oh my God, Baba would be like, get out of here.
Like you guys are being a little silly right now.
Yeah,
It's just
it
there's
means the
wind.
house, yeah, it means the house is drafty. I have to caulk up the windows again.
It's cold. Oh, okay. That's so
That's
funny.
like that the Appalachian magic with the weather rock.
Yeah.
That the weather rock. If the rock is wet, it means it's raining. If you can't see the rock, it means it's foggy.
I love that.
If the rock rolls down the hill, it's windy. You know.
I know.
I think it's a
Well,
little bit more than that.
I know. That is funny though. I like that. I haven't heard that one. I love that. Also, when you were mentioning before about like the candles, again, I really like to talk about Outlander on this podcast. So it made me think of
Ooh.
a scene in Outlander where Claire, one of the main characters, was making candles with the other ladies in the town. And it seemed like an all day activity. So I was like, Vodka was like, you know what? I'm going to use this candle for divination, but I also have to get things done. And do you know how much work it took me to get candles?
Exactly.
Yeah, like,
Exactly.
either she made them or she had to go to a lady who made them, who charged her, and she's like, "Oh my god, that's so
No,
hard."
listen, I think that like I remember a while ago I had posted something about making candles. I posted it just recently about it again. It just made me
Hmm.
think of it. And the person was like, "You repurpose your candles?" And I was like, "Yeah, if I burn down a candle for a particular intention or whatever, and there's a half of an inch and it won't light anymore, and I have a bunch of candles in the same fragrance or color, and I know that it wasn't used for banishing or something, and I'll
Yeah.
put them in the water, boil them down, and I'll make a new candle out of it and repurpose it. But what about all the old intentions?" And I'm like, do you think my grandmother had time for that? She's like, this candle left, I burn them together, I have a new candle. I pray over it, it goes away. Right? You repurpose it, you put new energies into it, you ask for it to be cleansed, or just the simple fact that it's sitting in a pot of water and there's steam and vapor, you can put your intentions into it and cleanse it. I'm cleansing this wax for the purpose of using it for a new ritual. There you go.
Yes, it's just like what you were saying. Like folk magic is really about using what you got, and you don't have to have anything fancy if you don't want. Again, we love fancy things. I love fancy things, but if you don't
Yeah.
have them, you can still do it. Like you don't need it. People, back in the day, they were like, "We got some apples, we got a candle, and we got a knife. All right, we'll figure this out. Like
There you
and some
go.
string. We'll figure it out. Whatever." That's
Somebody
the
said to me one time, as soon as said they saw a picture of my athame, and they were like, "That's not an athame, that's a kitchen paring knife." And I go, "Yeah, when you what? Did you want to argue with Baba about that?" I don't want to argue with her. She says that's what it. And I mean, honestly, like they didn't. She didn't call it. It was her knife. It was
yeah.
for cutting cords. It was for cutting connections. It was for like that kind of thing.
Hmm.
It didn't matter. And people would say, "What kind of a witch are you?" And I was like, listen, first of all, if I ever said to my Baba that's what she was, she'd probably smack me.
It's
You were just
not.
you were just doing the work, is that's what she called it.
Yeah. And a lot of things, there's so many things in a lot of our different cultures that we don't realize is quote now people are like, ooh, it's so witchy. But most of the time you're like, nah, that's just like what we do. Like you pour out liquor. Anybody, gang members pour out liquor for their dead homies, right? Is that still a
Yeah,
thing? I mean, and that's folk magic. You know what I mean? That's an
yeah,
offering to your ancestors. It's the same
yeah,
thing. So like there's things we do all the time that we don't realize are actually magical. We just don't label it because we're like, oh, especially in different cultures, because you're just like, no, that's just what we always do. We just
yeah.
always do it like this. And is there a reason? No. There is a reason from 3,000 years ago, but for you're like, no, this is just my everyday activity. When I leave the house, I throw holy water. When I do this, I do that. Like
Hmm.
it's just normal to you.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a beautiful thing. We had a lot of people on this podcast who do folk magic, and I love how everybody has their own practice and also how it becomes so easy for them. Like you said, it just integrates itself into your life. Like
Yeah.
it's very beautiful like that. I love a little folksiness. It's fun. This
Mhm.
is so random. I have a Polish coworker who I absolutely adore. She's hilarious. And there's a town in Poland and it's beautiful. It has all these like folk art and all
Mhm.
over it. It starts with a Z. I'll have to put it in the show notes, but I'm just hearing her right now because she always makes fun of me because I'm always like, "Oh, I want to go to this town. It's so beautiful." She's like, "I don't like the folk." That's all. The folk. That's what she talks about, and she just is like the funniest person on earth. I'm just imagining her yelling at me talking about the folk. The folk. She's hilarious. I love her so much.
I was gonna say you said the town starts with a Z. I was gonna say that's half the towns in Poland.
Starts with a Z and it has a name that is very long and all the J's sound like Y's and all the W's.
I won't even
And
venture I won't even venture a guess because I'm more Slovak American than I am Polish American. So
I know I mean they're both pretty difficult languages actually to learn. They're very hard, but they're very cool. Like when you hear people speak Slovak, I like it and it just sounds good. I enjoy it. Okay. We're going to go to our next section, which is our dish of the week. So you mentioned goulash in your biography, and I was like, I don't even know what goulash is, so that's what we're going to talk about.
okay. Okay.
I don't even know what that is. I've never heard of it.
Goulash is just it's just really it's just a word that means like a stew. And I think every
Yeah.
culture has their stews. It's a food of the poor people and if you could get meat in it, hey, it was a good day. And a lot of people would argue that goulash is more of like a Hungarian kind of a thing, but all the Slavic cultures have their goulashes. In particular, I know my baba used to make, well, everything is with cabbage. A lot of cabbage. We would make what we call kapusta, which is like a cabbage in the sauerkraut and pork, and you would boil it down, and it ends up just being, it stick to your ribs, good comfort food for the wintertime in particular. And then if you had a little bit of chlev, which is a bread when you made at home, then you dip it in there and that was good. Just, it was to fill you up, stick to your ribs, good home cooking kind of a thing.
Yeah, when I was reading, like, excuse me, especially in particular this recipe, that's what it sounded like. And again,
Hmm.
like you said, there's so many cultures. We had some in our podcast earlier. It was from Guyana talking about cook up rice, which was a similar idea. It was like
Hmm.
whatever you had, you put it in there, and that
Right.
was the situation. And like you said, if you had some meat, we're having a great day. Like you
Exactly.
just-
Put a little bit of andurki potatoes in there to fill up the space. And
yeah.
yep, absolutely. And of course, I wouldn't be Slovak if I didn't say make sure you add the garlic and the paprika. Lots of paprika.
I love it. Yeah, I see it's very like hearty. If you can do it, it's very
Mhm.
hearty and it's probably something that was easy to cook for the whole family. Like we're all
Yep.
gonna just eat this. And like you said, winter time, these are
Mhm.
countries where it gets cold. You like to have a warm soup, everyone can eat it. Usually it's the women who are cooking, they're probably like, look, I'm tired. I don't have time to be cooking all this stuff. Let me just cook a big pot so everybody can eat it and everyone can leave me alone so I can relax.
Absolutely. It's definitely a comfort food. It's definitely one of those foods that when you're having a bad day and it's what you're like, I could really go for a goulash, kind of a thing. Definitely. I mean, you're like, look, my husband's from Colombia, from the country of Colombia. Colombians have their sancocho. And the Creole French have what? Gumbo.
Yeah.
And the Irish have their beef stew. And we have our goulash, our kapusta.
Yes, I love it. So some of the ingredients in this particular goulash, we have onions, green peppers, ground beef, garlic, tomato sauce, diced tomatoes, beef broth, Worcestershire sauce, seasoned salt, Italian seasoning, bay leaves, dry noodles, and cheese. You could put cheese. But
No, you don't put cheese in goulash.
I don't know. That's what I was like. I wouldn't want to eat this with cheese. It sounds like cheese going to ruin it, honestly. I would like it without cheese.
Yeah. If they had cheese, it would be farmer's cheese, which is like a cottage cheese, and I don't think you would put that.
No.
I think my grandfather would hit me if I put that in the goulash.
Yeah, I think this is probably like the very American version because they're like, cheese.
Cheese goes good in everything. No, honestly, it is a version of a goulash. What I was talking to you about is more, it comes out to be almost like a white sauce to it. But the type of goulash that you're talking about is a really good goulash, and it's almost like a beef stew, and it's real rich. And of course, it's like anything if you have a bread to just dip in there and and then you need a nap afterwards.
Yes, this looks like a nap meal, but I'm going to probably actually make this at some point because this actually sounds really good. I was like, I'm gonna make this. Make
it in your slow cooker and then leave the cheese.
Yes, out. Yeah, definitely. We don't need cheese for this. Cheese gonna ruin, especially cheddar cheese. No, thank you. Okay, so that's goulash. This is an American goulash. I just found where it said that, but I'm also gonna find a more classic goulash and also put that in the show notes for people to look at too. Okay, so our next thing first, before we move on, let me plug myself. Hi, everybody, and thank you for listening to the show. So I know you're wondering, what's the big deal about ratings and reviews, and why is this woman always talking about them? Here's the thing. When you rate or review any podcast that you like, it gets more people to listen to it. It gets more recognized. It puts it out there. So I am here humbly asking you to please rate and or review the podcast. If you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, literally anything, it takes 5 seconds. Even if you want to go on my website, which is in the show notes and the link in my bio on any social media page, you will find a page where you can write a review on the website too. So it's completely up to you how you want to review. It's really easy. It does a lot for the podcast, and we really, really appreciate it. Okay, thank you, and continue to enjoy the show. Okay, so that's that. So now we're going to go to the next part. So your Instagram handle is Hearth and Besom?
Yes.
So I was like, I'm going to find some hearthy kind of Slavic spells to talk about because that's fun. I'm actually using Madame Pamita's book because she has a lot of these cool bread spells, like spells that involve food. And I was like, let's do that. There's a whole thing here, which I don't know. She's Ukrainian, but she does a lot of different Slavic stuff, like in general. There are this bread divination, which I thought was pretty cool. With bread divination, you can make bread in different ways to basically make it a spell. And I thought that was really cool. So here we were talking about how bread was traditionally, back in the day, baked on a Saturday. And it was believed that if the breads turned out really well, you could use ritual breads to bring luck, health, or wealth to your home. But if the bread was bad, that's not good. Because it meant... it meant shit was about to go down. It meant something bad.
Everything meant something. Everything meant something.
Don't you love? I love and hate it because that's also a very West African thing. It's like everything means something or everything has a spiritual thing behind it. And I know, and sometimes it is annoying because you're like, no, like it just fell. Like that glass just fell. But everybody's like, the glass fell. Our whole family is cursed.
One time I literally broke my ladle in half. I'm making something, I broke my ladle in half. And I posted it on my stories, and I was like, Kitchen Richards be like, it's a sign. It's a sign. And I wrote, it's a sign. I need to go buy a new ladle.
Isn't it so funny. I feel like every single person is, or like almost every culture, I guess Greek people, if you can break a dish for a good thing. But
Yeah.
and I know in Jewish tradition, after the wedding, they break like a glass. But
Mhm.
most of the other people I know, if you break something by accident, everybody's cursed. We all must need to go to church or something. Like I remember breaking like a bowl, like when I was a kid, because I was clumsy. And my dad was like, "Oh no, oh God, the bowl is broken." I was like, "What's gonna happen?" He's like, "I don't know, but I'm so nervous."
Or my favorite would be like, that's two. We're gonna have to wait for three. Things come in three.
Oh,
I'd be
yes.
like, oh God, I just slipped.
As soon as you hear like, and it, God bless everybody, but as soon as you hear like there's a 90-year-old woman that like so and so passed away, they're like, death comes in threes. So now you're just like waiting for it's like person was very, maybe they just
What are the odds?
It's so crazy. They're like, no, but death comes in. And like, okay, calm down. It's fine. It's gonna be fine. So yeah, if you have bad bread, it meant that everything's about to go wrong in your life or your family.
A lot in the Slavic culture centered around the harvest and the wheat.
Mm-hmm.
And because that was one of their main forms of sustenance. And of course, bread making was a very important part of the culture.
Yeah.
And it was all the Slavic countries, whether it was Yugoslavia or Croatia or Bosnia or Poland or Ukraine or Slovakia. This was our ancestors were farmers, and this was a central part. And if something went wrong with it, God forbid you opened the flour and found weevils in the flour. That was just like, that was it. You were cursed. Somebody had put the evil eye on you. It wasn't like, oh, maybe we should have put the lid on more securely, or we should have left it outside. Couldn't be that. Yeah, that's what it was. You were cursed. So yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
And that is another really good point that you brought up, because a lot of our ancestors were farmers or were dependent on the farmer in their community. If they weren't the farmer, maybe they were the blacksmith or they were the local midwife or whatever the situation may be. But when you come from people who weren't kings and queens, everything depended on the farmers usually in the town. And depending on where you're from, say you're from a place like a Slavic country where you have winter, everything needs to go well, right?
Yeah.
Because in winter, nothing grows, because that's how winter works. And then if you're from a hotter country, during rainy season, it has to rain the right amount, because if it rains too much, all the crops are ruined, right? But if it rains too little, all the crops are ruined. So all of our ancestors were very dependent on the weather. And I think that's why we have so many weather spells and weather gods, and because they were like freaking out. They're like, listen, if there's no meteorology, there's no refrigerator, if shit goes bad, it goes bad. That's it. They weren't be able to trade and get pineapples from Hawaii if you lived in Mongolia. That wasn't an option.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You weren't gonna starve. Like, so
that was it. It was a done deal.
Yeah.
And you know, what was interesting, though, along the lines of what you're talking about, is that a lot of times in the coldest part of the winters, that was it. There was you hunkered down in the house, and there would be times when it wasn't until spring that you found out that your neighbors didn't make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I think of sometimes like how, and people talk about, oh, religion is waning right now, big popular religions, and actually spirituality is like on the rise, but major religions are on the downfall or whatever. Not downfall, but you know what I'm trying to say. But you think about people like, oh yeah, those old people, they were so religious, and what's wrong with them? Because they had to be, because praying was the only way they would get through certain things. Like you're saying, if you have to be in the house for 3 months with just your relations, those are the only people, and you don't know how your best friend Matilda down the street is doing because you don't have a phone. And honestly, it's -3 degrees outside. You can't go outside to go hang out with Matilda. You don't know if
there's no snowplows coming down to clear the streets.
Snowplows.
You got you got a couple good snowstorms, one on top of the other, and you were in there for a while.
You were in there. The only time you went out was to take care of like your horse. Your good friend Matilda was pregnant. You don't even know if she got through that, because when she was about to have the baby, she has to call the midwife. Where's the midwife? Down the street. Can she get out of the house? So stressful. It's just so much going on. So I'm like, yeah, no wonder people were dependent on religion, because they were like, man, maybe this is the only way we're going to get through is by praying, right? Like, because
exactly,
what else? Again, we can't control the weather.
And then there was that whole, you're talking about people who didn't, they're poor people, so they don't have their lower socioeconomic, they don't have access to the education that we have access to today. And I mean, if you think about it, depending on the region and all, there were times when people were lucky if they got a third grade education.
Yes.
And so if you put yourself into that mindset of what you understood and what you thought when you were 3 years old, there was so much beyond our understanding. And so the natural conclusion for them was that there had to be someone greater than them controlling what was going on.
Exactly.
And I think at times too, it played into like, how do they make peace with these things that are happening? I mean, if you think about it, a lot of, we romanticize, our ancestors, and like you'll see people wearing the traditional folk dress and all of that and all. But if you really think about what their lives were like, it's scary. I forget, somebody quoted a statistic on infant mortality. Basically, like women got used to the fact that it was a 50-50 chance if your baby made it to their first birthday.
Yeah, exactly.
So think about going through those types of challenges with a third grade education. How do you rationalize this? The only thing you can do is to really say there must be somebody greater or somebody's greater than us controlling the weather and the sun and the crop. So we have to make them happy and please them. And of course, then there's the use of the prayer. If you're stuck in the home with your mother-in-law for an entire winter, you'd be praying, please, God, don't let me kill her.
There's that, too.
There's that. Please don't let me choke my husband for saying another stupid thing.
I know. It was rough,
biting his toenails in bed again.
I know. She's just sitting there like, is it March yet? Can I leave?
I'm going to kill him.
I'm going to lose my mind in this house with these people.
Listen, we get like that after one weekend.
Oh, yeah. During COVID, I think everybody was like, I'm going to lose it. Like, I don't get out of this house. This is what people went through every year. I know. Okay. So some of the other bread divination stuff. So we got, if the bread was supposed to be light and flavorful, that meant you were trying to get happiness in the home. If it was flavorful but a heavy bread, that means you were looking for kindness and wisdom in your home. However, challenges may arise. If you wanted the bread to be light, but it was unappetizing and flavorless, I mean, it was about greed and laziness. Oh no, that's not good. If it was tough and chewy, you probably didn't bake it well enough, but okay.
Or maybe you overworked it.
Yeah, but this makes sense, right? Because that means it was a lack of logical thinking. Yeah, because maybe you just did it wrong. That's okay. You can make mistakes. Dry and hard. Distractions. I love that. You were distracted and you left it in the oven too long, probably. Something is off. Yeah, probably. Cracks on the surface. That meant there was a warning of danger. And if it was burned, it talked about quarrels and spite. Makes sense.
Yeah.
People also really like to use honey and mead. Honey is like a big thing all over the world, I think, though, because people have realized, without bees, we'd all just like be dead and that'd be at the end of it.
But if you think about it, a lot of like the way that you're reading it, the way that she explains it, folk magic really follows logic.
Yeah.
It really follows logic. And so, if you burn the bread, like look what happened to me the other day without sharing too much of it. I was very distracted and I was cooking dinner, and the next thing I know, the water evaporated out of it. Like I could look at that and take it as a negative omen because I was distracted. So all of the water evaporated out and I burned the food that I was cooking. So a lot of it follows this type of logic. You started to talk about honey. On Christmas Eve, we have a very big tradition, an evening vigil that we do. And one of the things is that the mother of the home goes around she starts with the oldest, which generally is the dad, but she starts with the oldest male, and they do the patriarchal thing, go through the men and then the women, and she makes a sign of the cross on the forehead, and she wishes you the sweetness of the upcoming year to be with you always.
Oh.
Now the interesting thing was that, like, depending on who the mom was at the time doing it, you'd be like, oh, I just hope she doesn't have a heavy thumb, because otherwise he would be and my sister would be looking at me going, couldn't wipe it off yet. It's really gross. It feels disgusting. And then coupled with the fact that you've been baking and cooking for the entire week that has been humid, and you've got this honey running down the first of your nose. And I'd be I'd be like, yeah, wipe it off. You're going to be mean this year. Wipe it off. She'd be like, I don't want to be mean this year.
I love that.
Then another part of that meal with the symbolism was that we made, of course, we made our own bread, but my father would bless the bread, and then we would take a piece of the bread. Everybody takes a piece of the bread, and you dip it in that honey that she used to bless, and then you wrap a piece of garlic in it. And this is the other part. My sister absolutely hated this meal. I like garlic. She hated it. But you wrap the garlic in it, you eat it in the bread with the honey, and you eat it to symbolize that life is not always about the sweetness, but that with the bitter comes the sweetness as well.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You can only imagine what midnight mass smelled like after.
I know.
Families had this meal, but
because everyone's breath is garlicky and smells like, oh, that is so funny. That reminds me of, and I'm going to get this wrong, so I apologize, but I've been to like Seder at my friend's house for Passover, and there's a part of the meal where we eat something bitter, and I didn't know the first time, so I like ate it, and I was like, oh, I don't like this. She's like, yeah, you're not supposed to eat it. I was like, oh, oops. Oh, no.
wow.
Also, though, there's a lot of telling of stories, right? You tell this story of Passover during the meal. And I was so hungry because my friend's aunt, she can cook. She can cook. And I was like, I really want to eat all this food, but we have to keep talking. I was so hungry. I was like, I'll eat anything at this point. But yeah, it's something similar to remind us of the bitterness of, I think, the situation of what had happened. So that's interesting.
Yeah, Seder's beautiful. I've had the privilege of being invited to the Seder, and there's so much symbolism. And that, again, that's the folk tradition. It's the same thing with the Vasilia that we do on Christmas Eve. It's the same way. It has all of that tradition. And it's interesting because if you invite a guest to the meal, it's supposed to be a great honor to supposed to be a blessing to the family. But every time we'd have a guest come to the meal, my father would start from the beginning and explain the entire everything he was doing. My mother would be like, just get to the food. You're starving.
He's like, no, I want them to have the full experience.
No, exactly. They need to imagine being, and I mean, we kept this tradition up until a couple of years ago because my parents are elderly now, but last year I started picking up, or the year before, no, in 2020, I picked up the tradition and I started doing all the cooking and delivering it to people, to the homes so that we could have it. And one of the big things is that the meal has to start at sundown. In the wintertime, it gets dark at 5? Something like that. And so imagine being like 25 years old and having to say to your boss, you don't understand. I need to be in my father's house or he will lock the door and I will be disowned for the family.
Like, I can't come in till tomorrow.
I can't close. I need to be there. I mean, I remember being married and having my first kid, and my husband and I were like frantic driving up the causeway to make sure we got there in time so that he didn't lock us out. Yeah.
I love that. That's so funny. Oh, gosh. Actually, I think in here it talks about garlic too. We talked about honey a little bit. Honey is usually like a sweetness kind of thing. And then it talks a lot about garlic, but garlic is one of those things that people love to use, like protection from everything with garlic, the whole vampire lore with garlic. And then also there's a lot of stuff here with poppy seeds.
Yes.
I was like, ooh, yeah, poppy seeds are a thing. And there's a lot of love spells with poppy seeds.
Yeah, I love to work with poppy seeds. Poppy seeds really makes me feel very connected with Baba and with my culture, with my ethnicity, because it's used in all of the baking. And I mean, it's interesting because I learned how to make there's a poppy seed roll that you make where you cook the poppy seeds in like a honey and you make a paste that goes inside of this bread and then it cooks. Oh my God, it's so good. But the thicker the poppy seed, the better. I just loved it like that. And then like years later, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm eating all these poppy seeds. God forbid I should have to take a drug for work. I mean, like, I don't know how true that is nowadays because the poppy seed that we get in this country supposedly has been like cooked or washed or something, so it doesn't have that same effect as a true poppy seed. But poppy seeds are very big in Slavic culture, and you use them to induce. Think about, think about the Wizard of Oz when they go through the poppy fields. What happens to them? They get sleepy. So you're going to use it in any kind of ritual or spell where you want the person to fall into a state of confusion, to be like tired, sleepy. So if you're going to do it, if you're using it in a love spell, it's to get the person to become enamored with you and fall into that state of like bliss where they're just so happy with you. I use it in a lot of workings, like when I want to like, somebody's being a real pain in the rear end, and you're like, okay, you need to leave me alone. So you would incorporate the poppy seed into the working to help them get confused and lose their way so that they wander away from you, and just, it's the step before putting them in a jar.
Got it. I love that. I feel, that's like a gentler, like, you're like, okay, maybe leave me alone. And then they keep bothering you. You're like, okay, jar it is.
Yeah. Listen, my Instagram is very aesthetically pleasing. And like somebody said to me the other day, we were having a conversation. She said, you just have this sunflower energy about you. And I was like, oh, thank you. And I said, she always has to worry about the quiet ones.
Absolutely. 100%.
Don't mistake kindness for weakness, because if you step over that line, in the jar you go.
I love it. It's so true, though. People who do that, they're like, oh, so sweet. So like they could never hurt a fly. I'm like, no, those are the ones you got to watch out for. I'm like, because they could. I'm that same way. Don't piss me off. I'm very nice, but don't make me angry.
But in all fairness, it takes an awful lot. And I think a lot of that's come, like, I've mellowed with age.
Yeah.
And I think I posted last year around the Feast of the Seven Sorrows of Mary. I posted, what can we learn from it? And and I talked about how I had seen this girl online, another practitioner, a younger practitioner, who said somebody bumped into her at a club and she went home and she hexed the person. And I thought, like, that's just way too much energy for me.
Yeah.
To be honest.
It's just too hard.
Do you know how much work you have to put into a hex? And is it really worth it? Like, she bumped into you. You're like, it's people have done stuff like that. So,
I know.
I have to really, you have to really have rubbed me the wrong way for me to throw the left hand, as my girlfriend says.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. I know. I love that. So, actually, so there's some other stuff in here, but I'm not going to go into literally everything because I do want us to get to our story. But there's a lot of workings also with mushrooms and eggs. I really recommend this book for anybody who, wants to put their foot into some Slavic magical practices, because there's a lot of different information in here, and it's just a fun book to read. Yeah. This is Madame Pamita's Baba Yaga's book of witchcraft, which is pretty neat. Okay, so now we're going to go to our story. And actually, this story actually also has to do with her book by accident, but I just wanted to also tell this story. We did previously talk about Baba Yaga, which is a very popular deity in Slavic folklore and mythology. And this story is actually about Baba Yaga, but I like this story. I think I've said it before on this podcast. There are an estimated 3,000 Cinderella stories throughout the world, folklore, of the Cinderella archetype, I guess you could call it. And this is one of them, but this story, again, is very uniquely Baba Yaga, and it's just very... I like it. I like every Cinderella story I read, honestly. I have a few favorites, but this is also one of my favorites. I'm going to tell you guys a story today of Vasilia the Beautiful and Baba Yaga and how this all happened. Okay, so we got our girl Vasilia. So she was basically miserable. She was like a slave in her own house. And she had an evil stepmom. Her stepmom was mean, and she had a nasty stepsister. I think her stepmom was named Galina, and I forget, they don't tell me in the story what her stepsister's name was, but we know Galina was her stepmom. So Galina was real mean to Vasilia, and Vasilia, of course, was Vasilia the Beautiful, so she was very beautiful. Vasilia's dad was not in the picture, so Galina treated her like garbage, made her do everything in the house. She was exhausted all the time. So she actually, had this little doll that she used to talk to when she was sad, because Her mom gave it to her right before she passed away. Vasilia would always talk to this doll, and one day the doll looked at her and talked back, and Vasilia was like, oh my god, there's a doll talking to me. She was like, oh my god, I'm so nervous. The doll was like, don't be nervous, because that particular day Galina told Vasilia like to do all these chores. Vasilia was exhausted and she just wanted to go to sleep, and the doll was like, listen, just go to bed, and by morning all of your chores will be done. Vasilia didn't understand, because number one, there's a talking doll, and number two, who's going to do it? But she was so tired at this point, she didn't care. She was like, I need to go to bed. I've been working all day. So she goes to bed and she wakes up and the house is clean. Like, it is so, so clean. It's cleaner than she even could make it. So when she wakes up, the house is clean. There's food cooked. Breakfast is on the table, and she's like, damn, this doll is amazing. So she goes to the doll. She's like, oh my god, thank you, doll. And the doll's like, no problem, put me in your pocket so everyone doesn't see me. She's like, no problem. So she puts the doll in her pocket. Galina, her stepmom, comes down with her stepsisters, and they were like, who did this? And she's like, I did. And they were like, no, you didn't. And the stepsister like broke a glass and made her clean it up. Then Galina looks at her and she's like, what's going on? Did you break a glass? And she's like, oh my god, no. So she cleans it up really fast so Galina doesn't punish her for breaking up the glass. She just makes up some excuse. So then Galina then tells everybody in the house, tonight we're going to do our lace work, because that's what you do in these days. You get a candle, you do lace work. So they all sat around that evening and they started to do their lace work. And Vasilia, she hears Galina kind of whispering under her breath. She's like, she doesn't know what she's saying, doesn't know what's going on. And it's evening time now. So then all the lights go out in the house. All the candles are out. All the lights are out. All the lamps. And Vasilia's freaking out. She's like, oh my god, what's going on? What's going on? Now, this is back in the day. There's no electricity. And the mom is like the stepmom's trying to light a match. It's not working. She's trying to light the lamp. It's not working. So Galina's like, oh, this must be Vasilia, because remember how you cleaned everything and cooked this morning? That was definitely magic. And I'm testing you. And your magic is evil. See, you made all the lights in the house go out. And Vasilia is very confused. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, see, you're definitely a bad witch. And she's like, what? So then she's like, so Galina tells Vasilia, in order for you to reverse your evil magic, you need to go into the woods and you need to get a torch from Baba Yaga. And everybody's like, oh.
Yes. And you know why? Because Deb is basically sealing her death. Like,
exactly.
She figured she's not coming back from this.
Thank you so much, Caireann. Exactly. That's why she told her that. So she's like, everyone's shocked. Vasilia is like, no thanks. She's like, but the stepmom told her, if you don't go, I'm going to kill you. But Vasilia also knew that if she went, like Caireann just said, she's probably going to die. She was like, I guess it's better for me to die out there than in here with these people. They're crazy. She started crying. She was upset. She got the doll and she put it in her pocket. She started walking into the woods and she's like upset. The doll told her, like, listen, you're going to stay with me. I'm going to stay with you. I'm a doll. Don't worry. I'm not leaving you. And we're going to find Baba Yaga and just keep me in your pocket. Don't let her see me, because it's going to be a problem. But we're going to get through this. So Vasilia was like, okay, fine. So she walked all night in the woods. She's exhausted. She's scared. It's dark. All of a sudden she hears a horse, and the horse is galloping by, and she hides right behind a tree. So first she sees a white horse and a man in white armor. Then, like a couple minutes later, she sees a red horse with a man in red armor. Then a couple minutes later, she sees a black horse with a man in black armor. So she's like, that was weird. Okay. So she keeps walking though, and she finds Baba Yaga's house. Everybody, we all know what Baba Yaga's house looks like. And if you don't by now, let me tell you, it stands on chicken legs. And Baba Yaga, our girl, she flies in a mortar and pestle. This is like her thing. It was probably very frightening, but she steers it with the pestle. So she was like, so Vasilia sees the house. She was walking up to the house. Oh, and the fence is made of bones of children. That's great. So she hears cackling. She hears cackling like from up above. And here she sees Baba Yaga coming down in her mortar and pestle. And she stops right in front of her. And she's like, what do you want? And Vasilia's like, hey, sorry to bother, but I need a torch from you, apparently. And she's like, and Baba Yaga's like, okay, I'll give you a torch, but first you have to cook me dinner because I'm starving. And Vasilia's like, okay. She's like, you need to cook me roast beef. She's like, okay. So she cooks Baba Yaga roast beef. She cooks so much food. There could have been 4 of them in there. And Baba Yaga ate all the food. And then she got very sleepy. Then she's sitting in a chair and she says, tomorrow I'm going to go out, but I'm going to need you to do a couple things before I give you this torch. I need you to clean the courtyard, wash the floor, make dinner, prepare all my bedding and my clothes, and sweep the entire compound. And if you don't, I'm going to eat you. And Vasilia's like, what? I've gone from one bad situation to another bad situation. So she's like, oh my God, okay. So she's like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll do that. Baba Yaga falls asleep. And Vasilia's like, pulls out the doll, and she's like, doll, did you hear this? And the doll's like, yeah, I heard it, and it's going to be fine. I'm going to handle it for you. And she's like, oh God, okay, I'm so tired. I've been walking all day, and I've been threatened with death like 4 times in the past 24 hours. Like, she's like, I need to
Just
rest.
another Tuesday.
I know, exactly. I know. The doll was like, okay, just go to bed, say your prayers, and we'll figure this out. So Vasilia's like, the doll helped me out last time, so maybe this time she'll help me out again. So she goes to bed. She wakes up. And she didn't feel the doll. So she got freaked out because she's like, oh my God, Baba Yaga found it. She's going to kill me. But then she gets up and she sees a broom moving by itself. And she's like, where's that broom? What's going on here? And then she looks down and she sees the doll moving the broom. And she sees that the house is pretty much clean at this point. And she's like, oh my God, you cleaned the whole house? And she's like, yeah, I cleaned the house, girl. Get up. But I do need you to help me cook. And because I'm a doll and I'm only probably like 18 inches tall. So Vasilia's like, that's fine. I can totally do that. So she starts cooking. The doll's still cleaning for her. So by the time Baba Yaga gets back, everything is pristine and the food is delicious and it's ready to be eaten. So Baba Yaga is super suspicious of this. And she's like, okay, how did you do it? And she's like, I just did it. Like, I just worked so hard. And she's like, okay. So she's like, all right, tomorrow what you're going to do is you're going to do everything you did today, but you're also going to go to the barn. Oh, and here we go talking about poppy seeds. And she's like, and you're going to clean up every single poppy seed around this barn. If I see one poppy seed, I'm going to eat you. And she's like, oh, here we go with the eating me again. This is crazy. So Baba Yaga went to bed. Once again, the doll came in clutch. The doll was like, no problem. I'll clean up the poppy seeds. You clean the house. We're going to tag team. We'll be done by the time she gets home. And they were. And everything was fine. But this time, Baba Yaga got home and she was pissed. Because she's like, there's no way you can be doing all of this. There's absolutely no way. And Vasilia's like, no, everything is fine. Don't worry about it. She's like, yeah. But then she calmed down, Baba Yaga, and she was like, okay, because you've been doing such a good job, I'm going to allow you to ask me any question that you want. And she's like, okay, I'm a little nervous. But now, also remember, Baba Yaga's got all this weird stuff in her house, probably like jars of weird concoctions and things like that. And she's got a big hook nose. They call her the Iron Nose Lady in some stories. She's got a warty face. She looks like think classic Snow White witch. That's what Baba Yaga is supposed to look like, right? So she's like scary looking. So you'd think you have a lot of questions, like how old are you? Like what's going on here? Why do you live in a house with chicken legs? But Vasilia wasn't stupid. She didn't want to insult her. So she asked her like, hey, okay, yeah, I get one question. I saw these horsemen when I was coming here. It was real weird. She described what she saw. And Baba Yaga's like, oh, those are my horsemen. The white horseman is the bright day. The red horseman is the sun. And the black horseman's the night. She's like, I command the heavens and the earth and nature. And she's like, oh, okay, cool. I didn't know that. Vasilia's like, neat. So now Baba Yaga was like, I'm going to ask you a question. And Vasilia's like, okay. And she's like, how'd you really get all those chores done? And Vasilia's like, all right. Now she's having a moral dilemma because she's like, I could lie again and she might eat me anyway. Or I could just tell the truth and maybe she'll respect me for telling the truth. I don't know what to do. But in the end, she's like, all right, I'm just gonna tell her the truth. So she says to her, I have this doll and it was made with love. And that's how I got all the work done. And Baba Yaga was like, what? And she's like, yeah, it's just a magical doll that I have. And Baba Yaga, at first, she got really mad and said that Vasilia wouldn't have any blessings in her home. But then Baba Yaga, I think she was mad because she, quote unquote, tricked her almost. But then Baba Yaga was like, you know what? Actually, I'm a woman on my word. If I promise you a burning torch, I'm going to give you a burning torch. So she gave her a torch, but guess what? This torch was special. It was a burning skull. That's great. So she gives her a torch with a skull on it. Frightening, but it's fine. So she took it. And she said, take this home, give this to your stepmom, and it's going to provide the light that you need. And she's like, okay. So she takes it and she runs home. So then she got home. And the skull turned on the stick. The skull, okay, this is frightening. The skull turned on the stick and looked at her and said, be good and take me inside. Baba Yaga told you to give me to your stepmom, right? And she's like, oh, yeah, okay, fine, whatever, burning skull. So she goes in. Yeah, she goes in. She's very scared. She goes in. She calls her stepmom down. Her stepmom can't believe she's alive. She's like, what's going on? She's like, you wanted a torch. I bought you a torch from Baba Yaga. She can't believe this is happening. The stepmom grabbed the torch from her. The skull spun its head around to look at the stepmom and spit fire at her. The stepmom caught on fire. Oh my God, this is crazy, right? Yeah. So then the stepmom's on fire. So she drops the stick, the skull, and the skull then looks at the stepsisters and spits fire at them with its eyes. And now everybody's on fire except Vasilia. So she's running out the house. She's like, this is crazy. So she runs out the house. She's the only one who is alive. But remember, this is old-timey times. There's no shelter. So now she's just has no house and no family. This is not good for a young lady. She's like, oh shit, I don't know what to do. So she goes into town and is just like hanging out because she's like, I don't know what to do. And there's this old woman who sees her and she's like, do you need help? And she's like, actually, yeah, I do need help. I'm homeless now. My whole family was burned to death by a skull torch that I got from Baba Yaga. And it's a Spitfire. It's a Spitfire. And the lady was like, that's a crazy story, but whatever. You seem like a nice girl. So she took so the old.
Oh, sure.
She's like, okay. So this old woman, she's so sweet. Her name was Agnes. So she takes her in. And the woman was like, live by yourself. And she's like, I don't even want you to like do anything. I just want you to hang out with me. And Vasilia's like, okay, I'm going to hang out with you. You seem pretty nice. So they eat lunch. They hang out together. But Vasilia, and she wouldn't even let Vasilia do any chores in the house, right? Vasilia then started to get a little bored because she was used to doing chores all the time. That's like her life. She was like, I don't know what to do. And the old lady was like, you feel bored? And she's like, yeah, I need something to do. Agnes got Vasilia some flax and taught her how to spin. And the doll also helped her learn how to spin the flax so she could make clothes. So Vasilia got really good at making clothes. Like, she was so good. So the first thing she did was made a dress for Agnes because Agnes is her best friend. So she's like, Agnes, I made you a dress. I'm so psyched. So impressed. She's like, we have to take this to the king. And she's like, we don't have to do all that. I just made this for you because I love you. And Agnes like, I love you too, but like, chill. We have to take this to the king because this is amazing. So Agnes convinces her, and Vasilia's like, fine, I'm going to take it to the king, whatever. I'm so nervous. So they go together to the king's court. And Vasilia's like, I got to stay out here. I'm sweating bullets. Vasilia's sweating. Her pits are wet. She's like, I can't go see the king. I'm so nervous. Plus, Vasilia is still like, you can take the girl out of the awful home, but you can't take the awful home out of the girl. Like, she still feels like a peasant girl. She's like, I can't, look at me. I'm real regular. So she's like, I can't go in front of the king like that. I'm so basic. And Agnes is like, shut up, I'm going to handle this. So she goes in there and she's talking to the king for a little while. And all of a sudden, Agnes comes out, and Agnes is like, Vasilia, somebody wants to talk to you. So she goes in there, and the king is so excited to meet her. The king is around her age now, and he is handsome. And she notices. And he notices that she is Vasilia the Beautiful. And they lock eyes, and they're like, I think we're in love, because that's how love happens in these stories. They lock eyes. They're both in love. And that day, like 20 minutes later, he's like, Vasilia, will you marry me? And she's like, absolutely. And then they get married. And then she starts making garments for everybody, even though she's a queen now, just because she likes to. She starts making garments for everybody. And her garments were renowned, like known throughout the kingdom. Everybody was like, wow, Vasilia, she's such a good dressmaker. And like, she's so good. Such a good tailor. And then she and the king lived happily ever after, and her doll stayed with her for the rest of her life, and she took care of Agnes, and everybody was friends, and everyone was happy. The end. Yay!
Yay!
It all worked out. Thank God. And all burning skulls and all, everything was fine in the end.
Nothing like a beautiful Slavic fairy tale to lull you off to sleep.
Okay, can I say I like really enjoy fairy tales, obviously, because of this podcast, but also I read a lot of different ones. Slavic and German fairy tales are so hardcore.
Oh,
They're so hardcore.
seriously.
There's so many.
Like, oh, I'm so scared. I'm so scared. What you scared of? Go to sleep.
People's heads are being cut off. People are accidentally eating others. Like, it's a lot going on. I'm like,
oh, I've been threatened with death 4 times on the way. It's just another Tuesday.
Like, I love different cultures of this story. Like, and then there's like 1,001 Arabian Nights where like their folk tales just like don't really end. It's like it's never like happily ever after. It's just like, and everything was okay, but not really. It's like, what? It's so funny. Like every culture, just how they're so different with their folktales. But yeah, folktales and fairy tales they were meant to be dark. I don't think people realize that. Disney made you think they were supposed to be. No, they were supposed to be for adults. So yeah. That's why they're dark like this, because they weren't going to be like, and everything was fine. No, they're like, and then this crazy shit happened. And everyone's like, ah. Like,
I mean, if you think about it, that's really honestly like the way that they kept people from getting into trouble. I mean, I was talking to my dad recently. The temperature had been really high. And he had asked my husband to come down and do some work for him in the garden. And he was talking about, no, he can't come. It's too hot. It's this, that, and the other. And somehow we got to talking about the Slavic spirit of the mid-Nisan, who was supposedly this woman that walked with a sickle. And she would cut you down at the knees if you were caught working at noon in the summer heat. I mean, if you think about it now, it was heat stroke. But I mean, like how much more like scary is it like to say, no, don't go out there. This one with a big sickle will cut you down by the knees if you're in some. It's like, okay, don't worry about me. I'm staying home. Me in the house with a beer. No worries. But that's how these stories were too. I mean, like, where did these people live? They lived in the Slavic countries. They lived in the mountains, or there was woods all around, and bears and wolves and things it was pretty common to have those things wandering across your lawn or whatever on any given day. And like, how did you keep the children out of the forest? You just told them these stories.
Yeah. That's why witches are always in the woods. It's because they don't want you to get lost. Like, it's
because they can't deal with the crazy people in the town, so they go live in the woods.
Exactly. They're like, that crazy lady in the woods. They tell the kids so the kids don't get lost, but also there is probably just an eccentric person in the woods.
She's probably the one going, yeah, I'm crazy. You don't want to come around here. No, you need to stay in the town.
Meanwhile, she just wants to read a book. Like, she just wants to be left alone.
Make a nice tea, hanging out in the hammock, reading her book.
All day.
Away for a while.
Exactly. She wants to garden without everyone asking her what she's doing. Like, she just wants to relax. I'm going to leave her alone.
Stepping on my turnips. Always asking me for something.
They're like, ooh, it looks like you have some nice cucumbers. She's like, leave me alone. I want to eat my cucumbers. Leave me alone. Oh gosh. that brings us to the end of our show. So Caireann, thank you so much for being here. And can you tell us like where people can find you on the internet?
On the internet, they can find me. That's so old school.
I know.
You can find me on the socials. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Thread. I almost said Vine. Good Lord. I don't think you've had it on Thread. I don't do Twitter anymore because I don't like to argue with people. But I'm also on Facebook, and I'm just now venturing into YouTube, all at Hearth and Besom.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I never had a Twitter because I was like, I'm very confused. But I know Threads is the same thing, but I feel like Threads is very calm and fun. Everyone's just like posting about their day, and it's very cute. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I tried doing that Lemon 8 once for a little while, but I haven't gotten the hang of that one yet, so we might revisit it. But for
like I said, like I do every podcast, everybody, all of Caireann's links will be in the show notes if you want to go and explore it. She has like she said, her Instagram, very aesthetically pleasing. You'll learn a lot of little tips, very cute. I really enjoy it. I like your content. It's very sweet and nice, and I learn a lot, and it's fun. Of course. So, everybody, this has been Dine with the Divine. If you've been listening for an hour and you don't know what you're listening to next, again, you can find us on Instagram, on Facebook. If you really enjoy the show, I really appreciate if you guys leave me a rating. That can be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Usually those are the only two places. 5 stars preferably, but just say whatever you want. And if you say it with your chest, and you can send us you can send me suggestions for episodes, questions, comments. I do really want to start a comment thing. So if you want to send comments, I love a comment. Feel anything you want to send it to dinewiththedivinepod@gmail.com. And if you want to follow me, Ashley, I'm at SankofahS. That's SANKOFAHS. And Sankofa Healing Sanctuary on Facebook. Thank you so much again, Caireann. And
thank you for having me. First comment's going to be I couldn't sleep for a week after your
story. I know. People like, so this is what you do. You tell stories about brain skulls. Sometimes.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been delightful.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. And I will see all of you next week. Have a great week. Bye.